I'm Michael Washington. I'm a Microsoft MVP. And today I want to share something with you that I'm actually kind of passionate about. What this is it is my attempt to give you your own personal data warehouse. And if that doesn't make sense, I hope to explain that, what I mean here. This project that I'm going to be sharing with you is a GitHub, MIT license, open source, everything is free. I even put a version of it on the Microsoft Store, of course, for free so that it's easy to download. And I'll show you how that's done. And yeah, I guess let's go ahead and dive in. Oh, and one more thing. This is a Blazor Maui app, but actually I guess you would consider it Blazor Hybrid. So it runs on your desktop on, right now I only have a Windows version. And so it's, Blazor. And I will be diving into the code at the end of the presentation. Okay, so this is the agenda. And basically, we'll be talking about the personal data warehouse, and I'll show you how it works in the middle here. However, I'm first going to start off with introduction to data. And the reason why I want to do this is it explains why I created the project in the first place. Because I've been dealing with data in applications, obviously, for decades. However, I never really considered exactly, how the data is being used and what state it's being used. I just connected to, SQL Server and just inserted data and pulled data out. However, when I decided to create this project, I really had to step back and say, what do people really need data for? And how could this project really be useful? So I do want to start off with explaining and looking at data in ways that you may not be used to. Then, of course, we're going to dive into the actual application, what it does, how you would use it, why you would want to use it, and then, of course, finally, we're going to dive into the code on how it works. And hopefully, you'll stay for this section because I think there's a lot of features in this application that you can pull out and use in your own applications. Two of the main things is I show how to dynamically create C# and Python code and then execute that code. And the reason why you'd want to use this in your own applications is you can provide functionality for your users when transforming data. And again, I'm going to cover why that data transformation step is so important. But you're able to allow your users to create powerful transformations inside your application in ways that you really cannot do any other way. The second thing that I think you might want to pull out of the code, and we'll cover it, is creating SSRS reports dynamically and executing them inside your code without the need to use a external SQL Server reporting services. So hopefully, if that's something that interests you, hope you'll stay for the entire talk. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Well, first, let's talk about data. Okay, the first thing about data that I had to pull back and really think about and realize is that data is not the thing. It always represents another thing. And I found that there is no exception to this. So even log files, you would think that, well, the log files are in the database. They're the thing. But really, they represent someone visiting your application, someone performing some sort of action. So the data that we're talking about always represents a thing. It itself is not a thing. Now, the second part, and this is the theme that goes throughout this entire presentation, is that the purpose of data is always to allow a human being to make a decision. Therefore, every single step that we'll be covering leads toward that goal. There's three modes of data, and the first one is obvious: collection, obtain it somehow. The second part, transformation, and that's the majority of what we're going to talk about. So a transformation is any time we change the data from its initial collection state. Now, how we make those transformations, that's really what the majority of this presentation is about. And then finally, is exporting the data. And this is what is a step that allows a human being to make a decision. So I separate it into exporting / reporting. The difference is that when we're exporting the data, that is something like just show it on the screen in a grid, or give them an Excel or CSV output, right? That's a simple export. People can use it, and they can use that to make decisions. The difference between that and reporting is usually executive level, meaning a person who is not necessarily technical, to present the data in some sort of format that, again, allows them to make a decision. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and dive in further. Here, I just have this quick slide to just kind of show the data journey from the left to right. We have the raw data, that's the collection. You import it somehow. The transformations in the middle, this is where the true value of the data journey happens. And then, of course, you have the reporting or the exporting. And then the final thing at the bottom, at the right-hand side, that's a human being using that report or export to make some sort of decision. Again, I want to iterate. The purpose of data is always to allow humans to make decisions. Therefore, everything we're covering is always going to lead toward that. I want to have a couple of quick slides just to illustrate the modes of data. And I want to illustrate it not just with computer programming, but let's look at a restaurant, okay? So if there were a restaurant, the data collection part, you could have customer profiles. Someone joins your mailing list or something. You also have inventory levels. You have someone go back and say, hey, see how many cans of beans we have. Write it down on a sheet of paper. We also have order details. This is when the waiter or the waitress comes by and says, hey, what do you want to eat? So that is collecting data. Looking at this in a computer program, obviously we know we have screens where people put in their information. Again, if this were a computer program for a restaurant, you would have a way for people to enter or scan the cans to get the inventory levels. And of course, you could have an iPad where the waiter or waitress can take a person's order. Let's look at transformation. When in a restaurant, now we're back to just pencil and paper with a restaurant. When a person, the waiter or waitress takes the initial order, but then they give it to the head chef, and the head chef has got all these sous chefs and all these people back in the kitchen, and they want to break it down. Let me give this part to the pastry chef. Let me give this part. So when they do that breakdown, that is a transformation, right? We took the initial collection of data and we somehow transformed it, yet there's still a connection. Another thing is someone further down the line can then break down other tasks. Again, that is what we consider a transformation. Now, looking at a computer program, the reason why you see so many things there is that is really what computer programs do, is they make transformations. That's where they provide their value. So again, I have all sorts of things where they can figure out top customers and product sales and break things down. Now let's look at the exporting part. So let's go back to the restaurant, the pencil and paper. Once someone says, okay, here's the task for this person, and to give that, sheet of paper to that person, that is in a way some sort of export, or kind of call it like a report. Here's another report that you get at a restaurant. The meal is over, it's time to pay. They give you a receipt. You see, so that's what I consider an executive level report, because it explains very important things. This is what you ordered. This is the tax. This is, all the other things, so that the person can then make a decision. Do I agree with this and I'm going to pay, or how much am I going to tip? So that's an example of a report. And then, of course, obviously, in a web application, certain screens that say, here's the sales forecast after we've transformed the data. Here's the inventory restock, or here's some sort of dashboard. Okay, so that just covers the looking at data in a different way. And now let's talk about the personal data warehouse. So the personal data warehouse has three main components. Looking at from the bottom to the top, importing data. That's the collection part we've been talking about. Transforming data in the middle. This is where we'll spend the most of our attention. And report generation or exports. You'll see there at the top. Now, if you want to use it, it's actually really easy. There's three basic ways. First, it's on GitHub. So you just go to GitHub. You have full source control. Again, this is not a commercial product. There's no upselling. There's no premium version. Everything I'm talking about is right there. You have full source code, so you can get it out of GitHub. If you just want to run the application, you can get it from the Microsoft Store. Again, it's completely free. And you just go to the Microsoft Store, search for it, and install it. Also, if you know how to use WinGet, you just type WinGet install personal data warehouse, and it'll go ahead and install it for you. When you open it up, the configuration is actually quite simple. There's really only two things to configure. The first thing is the AI. So what this does is it uses AI to just make things faster and easier for you. And that's really why I really created this application. As far as the AI, you can use OpenAI or Azure OpenAI, or if you have the free LLM Studio or Olama, you can run the AI locally, and it will connect and work with that. Also, for database management, you can have unlimited databases, and all the databases are their folders that are actually created in your documents folder, and group together all your tables and your views and your reports that I'll be showing you later. So it starts off with the default database, but you can also create new databases, which again create new folders, and you can export them to save them, or you can upload them. So let me just go you through a quick start to kind of show how the application is used. So the first thing you do, you might want to create a database. So you go to settings, go to database management, click new database. And in this case, we're going to create a new database called Acme. And the reason why we're doing that is later when we're using AI to, we're asking it to perform functionality, we'll say, hey, make this function out, look for the customers table that's in the Acme database. That way it's kept separate from the customers table that happens to be, say, in the Northwind database. So that's the only reason why you really want to create databases, is to really help AI. And also if you export or import, you're always importing by database. So it's just a way of keeping things grouped. So we're going to make the database called Acme. So it then shows up there. You'll see that you have the ability to rename it, export it, or upload a new database, or even delete it. So the first step is importing data. This, of course, is the collection stage that we talked about. So in the application, that's the table section. So we'll go to tables, we'll click the button to add a new table. And at this point, we can import either from SQL Server, Fabric, or Microsoft Fabric, or we can import from a file. In this case, we're going to choose file. And we have two Excel files that we're going to import, the customers and the sales. So first, we'll select the customers. And again, this is just an Excel file. We open it up. It'll actually show up in a grid, and that grid is actually editable. But we're going to click Save, and we're going to save this in the Acme database as customer. We're then going to do the same thing for the sales. So now they've both been imported. That's the collection phase. Now we're going to create a view. This is the transformation stage. So we'll select View. We'll select New View. And at this point, the view can be coded in either Python or C#. And this is the part I kind of want to stop at. Throughout my career, when I do a data transformation, I'm using T-SQL. The thing about T-SQL is it requires a SQL Server, which again has a cost. So the big thing that Personal Data Warehouse does is it is not T-SQL. So therefore, all the transformations are either in C# or Python. And what I found is that there is no transformation that I cannot do. And for many transformations, especially complex transformations, is actually far easier to do that transformation in C# or Python. Okay, So continuing with this example, we're going to select Python. And what it does is it kind of puts the default, Python program here. But we want to do our own transformation. So this is where we're going to use AI. So we're going to click the AI button there. And at this point, the box pops up, and we then just describe what we want. So at this point, we've imported a customer table and a sales table. So in this prompt, I'm going to say, okay, in the Acme database, and again, that's so that it doesn't get confused with, say, the customer table in the Northwind database. In the Acme database, I want you to join the customer and the sales table and return the top 10 customers by total sales. I want you to also return the customer name and the total sales and the number of those orders. So what happens is it's going to have to create a join here because in the sales table, I have the sales, but I don't have the customer name. I just have the customer ID. The customer ID is also in the customer table, and that's what the customer name is. So I just, again, choose my language, I hit submit, and then it's going to send it to the AI. It's also going to send the entire schema, not the actual data, but the schema of the data and my request. And then I'm also going to have instructions on how I want the final program to come back. And I will show you at the end this AI code and exactly how that works. And then I get back something like this. So the first thing is that I've instructed the AI to create a method called load data, because this will then be executed to then show the data. I've also instructed the AI that based upon which tables you want, look for the Parquet file. And all the data that's imported is actually stored in Parquet files, which happens to be the industry standard for data warehouse files. And then, of course, it created the program, and it then returns the results. So at this point, I can then hit the run button. It's going to say, wait, you need to give this view a name. So I'll give it a name, top sales, and then I'll hit the run button again. And that Python program will execute, and the results will come back, and then the program will display it. I do want to stop and call out one quick thing here. Originally, I wanted to use AI to allow me to transform data. And I found out that ChatGPT, LLMs, they cannot add. They're just bad at math, period. Therefore, the only way to get an LLM to do what I just showed you is to have that LLM write code. LLMs are really good at writing code. So therefore, if you take one thing from this presentation, it's that when you want to use AI to manipulate data, provide insight, what you want is you want the LLM to write code and then execute that code. Okay, so that's what's happening here. Now, we can take it further. I can click the AI button again, and now I can say, alter the script to show the top 20 cells rather than just the top 10. I hit the button, and then it just writes the code. And the difference here is that instead of one page, which had 10, we now have 2 pages. Finally, let's look at creating reports. This is that output stage. So you go to reports, you click the report wizard. Now you can select a table or a view. So remember, we just created this view called top sales. And now I give the report a name. So I'll call the report top sales, and then I'll click submit. I'll close the box here. I'll then hit run. And boom, it creates an SSRS report. At this point, but we'll notice that it's pretty darn ugly. So right now, this right here is all one word. Of course, we like this to be wider here. So again, I can use the AI button. I can then describe the change I want. Increase the width of the customer name column by 50%. Rename customer name to customer, total sales to sales, and order count to orders. And then boom, it will, see, it fixed that and kind of made it a little bit wider. Now, you may say, okay, that's interesting, but this report still looks kind of ugly. I'm going to show you how you can fix all that. One more quick thing about creating the transformations. You can create more complex transformations than the one I showed. So in this case, I have two tables, and they have differences, but the differences can be in any of the possible columns. So here, I'm telling it to, compare them, and it's on the entity ID, and to figure out all possible differences and display them in a JSON string. And you'll see that for each business entity ID, it indicated if there was a mismatch at all. And if there was a mismatch, this right here, we'll go through every single possible thing showing what the original value is and the new value is. When I export this as a report, I can obviously see the full details. This browser thing here doesn't show everything, but so this was actually something I used. I really needed in real life, and I was really amazed that yes, it gave me exactly what I wanted. And to try to do that in T-SQL would have been a lot of work. Okay, so something I did want to do really quick is just to kind of show you the application in action. So I just created this short 3-minute video. So it first starts off with, again, how do you download and install this? So here we're showing you how you go to the Microsoft Store, you search for Personal Data Warehouse, and you just click the install button, and it installs. It's that easy. You can go to settings, and again, you can create a new database. Again, I showed you how we created the Acme database, but again, there's already a default database, so you don't have to do this step. And you can then, of course, configure the AI. And again, you can use OpenAI. That actually does have the best performance. In the O1 Mini, we really will give you the best performance. So we're going to go to tables, and we're going to click the button to say, create a new table. We're going to choose a file, and we're going to choose the Acme customers. And here's showing you that that grid is editable. And we're going to say, put that in the Acme database. And then we're going to do the same thing for the cells table. We'll click New, choose File. We'll click Acme Cells, open it up, and then click Save. And we're already in the Acme database, and we'll save it at the cells table. Okay, so now let's look and see what the transformations look like. So we'll go to View. We'll say New View. Again, you can do the views either in C# or Python. So we'll go ahead, select. We'll click the AI button. We'll indicate what we want here. It will then write the code. We'll see the code. We could edit the code if we wanted to at this point, but we'll go ahead and hit Run. We'll give the view a name, but we'll make sure we put the view at the Acme database. And then when we run it, we see the results. Now, of course, we can simply alter it. And now we say, well, we want it to be the top 20 instead of the top 10. And it will automatically adjust the code. And when we run it, we get our results. And there's a little paging thing there. Okay, finally, we're going to look at how do you create a report. So we click on Reports. We click the Report Wizard. We select our view, top cells. We, of course, give it a name. Go ahead, close the window. And then when we run it, we'll actually see the report. And then now we will use the AI to alter the report. And we just basically say, fix, the layout. This part does take sometimes a minute or up to 2 minutes. And then, of course, we can do the print. Okay. let's dive back in. Now, let's talk about those transformations. The key thing to know about transformations is transformations require substantial computing power. A lot of times we don't think about it because we're already in the cloud, we already paid for the cloud, or I'm running SQL Server on my computer, it's already there, it's already running. However, there are costs, and when dealing with large amounts of data, those costs can be significant. So many of us are using cloud-based. And again, I have nothing against cloud-based, but cloud always does transformations remotely. And services like Microsoft Fabric, they charge for those. The cheapest Microsoft Fabric that you can get is about $300 a month. Again, not a lot for certain companies, but let's say you just want to do data transformations on your own, you're kind of like, well, that is actually too much money. So now let's talk about local computing. The thing is that you already have your computer. You already paid for it. So using your personal computer can reduce the cost. And you don't really need to use the cloud. So that's why I call it the personal data warehouse, because everything is running on your computer. You don't have to pay for anything. So even if you don't want to pay for OpenAI for the AI stuff, you can download a free program like Ollama or LM Studio, and you can use that for the AI. So therefore, the personal data warehouse is about empowering you for data management. And hopefully you can see it allows you to do pretty much everything you would need to do regarding the collection, the transformation, the exporting and reporting of that data. But there's more features. Oh, again, of course, it has a AI transformation, to also help. Let's look at some other features. Exporting and reporting of the data. Let's first look at exporting. So there's a section called Cloud Data. And what this does is it allows you to connect to a SQL Server or a Microsoft Fabric warehouse. And you can then just, so once you connect it, you then click the upload button, and then you can select any table or view that you have in the personal data warehouse. You indicate what the table name is that's in the external SQL Server or Fabric. You click select, and then it just pushes the data out. So it's a way for you to get the data back out. In addition, there's an editor, so that when you're connected to a database, you can, for example, select a table, and it'll show the entire table in a grid, and everything is then editable. And I put that there because there were some cases where I upload some data, but then I need to check the data, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I want to make some changes, and I didn't want to have to jump into another program, so I put that feature in there. Microsoft Fabric does not actually have this ability. So for Microsoft Fabric, this actually connects to a Fabric table, shows it in a grid, allows you to make changes, and hit the save button, and it will actually save. And that's a feature that actually is not in Microsoft Fabric. And again, I put that in there because I needed it for myself. Also, because I just like putting extra features, there's data visualization. So if you go on the Custo tab, you're able to select a view or a table, and you're able to then describe some sort of visualization. So in this case, I'm selecting the customer table, and I'm saying show a bar chart of territory IDs and the count of store IDs. And I click submit. And what it does is KQL is a language created by Microsoft that they use in various programs. But then they open sourced it and made it available. So it writes the query in KQL, and then of course shows a visualization. So this is just something that I shoved into it, and the reason why is that one of the things that KQL is really good at is showing visualizations for time-based data. So that's why I kind of shoved it in there. So if you have that need, this is a thing that you might, a part that you might want to use. Now let's talk about reports. And this again is the other feature that I think you might want to, go into my source code and rip out my source code and actually use this in your own applications. So let's jump into a quick video here that we're going to go back into reports, but this time I'm going to show you how to create a report, like you see there on the screen, which is when people think about reports, this is what they mean. So I'm going to show you how that's accomplished using the personal data warehouse. The way it's accomplished is we're going to show how you can use the Microsoft report builder. This has been around for decades, and it's free. And it shows how you can use the Microsoft report builder to enhance your reports. So here, we're going to start at the beginning again, where we're going to show how we're going to import data. So the first step, we're going to go to tables. We're going to say new. We're going to choose a file here, and we're going to choose this employee file. So you see there's data here, and yes, it's all editable. So we'll save this as employees. But now we're going to go straight to reports. And like I showed you before, we're going to click the report builder. We're going to select that employees table this time, submit, give it a name, and run it. And boom, we have a report, and it's pretty darn ugly. We're going to go to download the free Microsoft Report Builder. And we're going to export the report as an RDL file from the Personal Data Warehouse, and then open it up in the Microsoft Report Builder. At this point, I'm kind of showing how you're just using a Microsoft Report Builder to do anything it does, and it does everything you really need. However, I'm also going to show how we can add a chart. So this is just standard stuff if you've used the report builder before, and I've added a chart, and there you are. And then I can upload that RDL file, and now it's back into the Personal Data Warehouse. And I can then use the AI button to make even further changes if I needed to. So I just kind of want to show there that the Personal Data Warehouse allows you to create full reports. And that flow that you saw where I was able to export the report as an RDL file, open it up in Report Builder, actually have live preview. And that's done, the live preview is done because the Personal Data Warehouse sends out, exposes a stream of the data to allow that live preview to work. And then, of course, you can then re-import that report RDL file back into the Personal Data Warehouse. And in no time do you need Microsoft SQL Server installed on your machine or to connect to. Everything is all done inside the Personal Data Warehouse. Okay, so with the remaining time, I actually want to dive into the code. So there's 3 sections we're going to cover here. First, the transformations. I'm going to show how the transformations are done using C#. I didn't show that, but I'm going to show you the code. And then I'm going to show you how the Python transformations are done. And that's using a library called Pyodide. For the C# transformations, it's using an open source application called CS-script. And then for Python, it's an open source library called Pyodide. We're then going to cover the AI transformations. All that is using prompts. So I'm going to show you the prompts, walk you through them, and you're going to see how, wow, this is pretty easy, and I could adapt this into my own code. And then finally, we're going to cover reporting, and I'm going to show you how the reports are created dynamically, how they're altered, and again, also how the connection with Report Builder and Personal Data Warehouse is done. Okay, so first let's go into the transformations. And there you go. Okay. So give me a second here. Okay. So for the transformations, let's first cover the C# transformations. So what happens is that I basically have this load view. Sorry about that. I have this load view method that's called, and you pass to it a database name and the view name. And what happens is that this is going to return a dictionary. And the reason why it's returning a dictionary is because each view is going to return something different. So the UI has to, expect anything. So therefore, it returns a dictionary. So therefore, it can display anything. So based upon the database name, it looks inside your My Documents folder. There's a folder called Personal Data Warehouse, and you have your databases by database name. It then looks in the views, and taking the view name, it grabs the view. In this case, it's just going to be C# code, or it also can be Python code. So if the file exists, it just reads all the data, and then it says run dynamic code. And when it runs that code, the response is always going to be a dictionary. So let's take a look at that run dynamic code. If there's something in that code that's, definition load data, we know it's Python. So therefore, it's going to execute Python. And I'll show you next really the more deeper into how that works. However, if it's C#, so else, it's C#. So then it just calls the CS script library, passes that code, and then says there's a method in the C# code that always, C# code always has a method called return result. So it just says, okay, run that code, load that code, and then call the return result. This is dynamic, so that's why it's able to just say return result, and then you have a result, and that's it. So for C# code, to run dynamic C# code is very simple. You just need the CS script library, and it's about this much code. Now the Python code, as you see, it's more code, and the reason why is for Python, even though there are C# Python executor things, I couldn't find one that would allow me to dynamically pass the raw Parquet files, execute, and then return a result. They all came close, but nothing could actually do it. The only one that could actually perform this was a free open source library called Pyodide. However, Pyodide is a JavaScript library. So the reason why there's more code here is I have to move the stuff, the data files, into the JavaScript sandbox, then execute the transformation, and then pull the data back out. So I actually created an entire blog post because I, of course, made a proof of concept of this, and that's on my site, blazorhelpwebsite.com. And so if you do want to use Python, I'd recommend just looking at this article, because the article, talks about, what do you need to set up? This button does this. This code's done here. You're executing the Python, code. You could actually make changes here, and you can then still get the result. So for that one, if you're interested in the Python, I'd recommend looking at this blog post. Let's look at the AI stuff. So now we're back to Personal Data Warehouse here. If you go to templates, all these templates here that have AI in front of them, this is the AI code. So what happens is that whenever dealing with LLMs programmatically, here's my recommendation, and this is what's worked for me, and I've created numerous programs over the years. You want to be very clear to the LLM what it is you want to do. So here you see I have the instructions. This specific one here is the one to create the transformations. So you have the instructions. Numbering the instructions is probably best, and having hash mark sections like this is also extremely helpful. So here I'm telling it that I want, this is for the C# code. I want you to, return result. I want you to have a method that says return result, and you give it all the instructions on this is how you should load tables. Here I do a search and replace. So when this script is run, the current schema, based upon the tables that person has loaded, I then insert that here. If there's already existing code, I insert that here. Whatever the person typed in the prompt box, I insert that here. I do a search replace. But here's the most important thing: examples. This is how you get the LLM to actually act right. So here, I'm basically saying, if I said, create a collection of 10 random people, this is the result I want you to give me back. So again, I wanted to wrap in JSON, and I want to have a response property, and this kind of goes all the way off to the side, but I give it a good example. You need to give it at least one example. Preferably, you give it 3 examples. So here I'm giving just 2 examples, but giving it more and more examples, that's the key to getting AI to work. So again, this is the one for the Python template. So again, it's pretty much the same thing, but again, this time it's in Python. By the way, one way I created this Python example was I just took the C# example, put that into into ChatGPT, and then I said, please create a template like this, but create it for Python. So actually, that's how I created this thing. I was but then I come back and make some changes. But I actually used AI to help me write my AI prompts. Again, this is the one for creating and altering SSRS reports. SSRS reports are just XML. So you're just basically telling it to create XML, and then you just save that XML either as RDLC or RDL, and that's how it works. Let's dive into how the reports are created. How the reports are dynamically created. This is like the report wizard, not the AI part. So even though SSRS reports are just RDLC files or RDL files in their XML, in order to run them, you actually have to have extra files. So you have to have an XSD file. So this is actually what took me a lot of time, which was to write code that, when passed, the structure will actually create your XSD file. So what I'm doing here is I have a class. So each report just has a standard C# class that represents the properties of the data that's in their report. So I'm using reflection to get those properties and basically iterate through those properties and create the XML that the XSD file needs. And this is a lot of work. So again, I would say, if you're interested in this, just go steal my code and save yourself a month's worth of work. Because to get this working, like I said, it took a lot. And this is also leveraging another open source library that actually then does the heavy lifting of rendering this without the use of having a Microsoft SQL Server reporting server. And finally, when you're using the Microsoft Report Builder, there's a place where you want to be able to do a live preview of your data because it helps you design the report. So then I realized I had to make personal data warehouse expose your data, to the report builder, and it turned out to actually not be that hard. So remember, this is a Blazor hybrid application, and it turns out that you can basically inherit from that action filter attribute. Okay, I'm going to do that last time. I'm going to do that. And you can basically say and override the on action executing. So context is what's coming in, right? And the first thing I'm doing is, for a safety reason, I'm basically saying, unless the person's on localhost, then just kick them away. And this is so that if you're running personal data warehouse and for some reason someone's able to kind of get to your computer or whatever, I don't want them to be able to then get into the personal data warehouse and start digging into your data. So this is in there. It only works from localhost. Obviously, if you can just get rid of all this if you wanted to allow it to be executed from whatever. Otherwise, it then exposes the method called getData, which is you specify a database and a data source, and it's just basically at that point going to return the data back. So the Microsoft report builder, when you open up, when you export your report, I rewrite the code so that it will automatically know and be wired up to connect you to your localhost personal data warehouse and to call this getData method. And it's expecting to get, basically it's a web service and it's expecting to get the data back. So it's already all wired up for you. And this is what it's going to end up calling. So at that point, it just, grabs the data and then returns it. And then that's what makes that live preview work. Okay. Oops. Not that one. I want this one. Okay. So that's basically what it does. Feel free to go check it out. I have forums there if you have questions. That's the best way to reach me, is the forums on the GitHub repo. And I just hope that people find this useful.